All right, welcome back to part 2 of what is turning out to be a new series I'm going to be doing on the Helix. I did this as a one-off video where I had a viewer submit a tone to me that they wanted help with, and to see if I could maybe help them dial it in to closer to what they were imagining it to be. And it worked out well. I got great response, and I've had a whole bunch of submissions to continue to do this. So I figured, what the heck, we'll do a few more. And as I have time, I'll do just that. So this week, or this installment, I don't want to say I'm going to be doing it weekly, I'll try my best, is from one of the viewers named Anton Blumhoff. I hope I'm pronouncing the name right. Forgive me if I'm not. He contacted me with his patch and was asking if I could help him get it just a little closer to what he was hoping to have. There was a few complaints he had with it. What it is actually, he described to me, it's a sound that he uses for a David Gilmour type sound on the Pink Floyd song Marooned. And so he sent this through to me. So let's dive right in and take a look at what he sent me and what I did to change it. In the end, Anton was very happy with it. I sent him one version of it, and he said, I was kind of hoping for a little bit more sustain, and you'll see why he said that once I show you how I changed his patch around. That could be because we're using different guitars. I'm using my Godin RG3 with just stock Godin pickups, are going to be very different output than possibly the pickups other people are using. So this is a tough thing. And again, this is all my opinion, right? I kind of dial these in based off the explanation that the viewer gave me when they sent it in. But again, it's just going to be dialing it in the way that I kind of feel it's working the best. There could be a huge number of ways to dial these in differently that would all be perfectly acceptable. So again, I'm not passing this off as my way, it's the only way. It's just more that, you know, somebody's asked me for my opinion about it, and I can only just dial it in the way that I want. So I did make one change to it because he wanted this a little bit more sustained, saying that his pickups were, he felt a little bit lower output. So I'll go into the details of what I did, but the second one, he was incredibly happy, and he told me he was having a hard time putting his guitar down after, so that made me happy. So what we started off with, just as an overview, he had a pitch whammy, basically a whammy pedal effect put in. I didn't even touch that. That was fine. It sounds like Gilmour uses that effect on that song. That was great. Basically, that's going to, you know, throw it up an octave, which was perfectly fine. He used a red squeeze compressor. Then he stacked 3 overdrive and fuzz pedals on top of one another. He had the Scream 808, Triangle Fuzz, and the Kinky Boost, okay, which was feeding into a chorus, into the Huwatt 100 amp, and he used an amp cab block, which I kind of changed up after, and you'll see why. I'll explain. And that fed into path 2, which was a delay, a simple delay, and into spring reverb. So here's what his patch sounded like. Okay, so my first impressions of this, and this is what I do with this. When I get the sound, I take what the viewers told me they're looking for, I listen, and then I just try to instantly come up with my first impressions of what I would change if it was me using this sound. And again, it's all opinion, right? So my first impressions, and I have my notes here I'm just referring to, is it makes it a lot easier that I don't forget anything. That there was a little bit too much gain, and it was a little bit too edgy. I don't know if you picked up on that, but now, overall, it has a fairly smooth sound, but there was just a subtle edge there that I was thinking was probably being caused by the triangle fuzz with the sustain up on 10. That was my first impression, and I could be wrong about that, but I did change that, and it seemed to fix it up. The other thing I noticed about it was a little bit muddy sounding. There wasn't a lot of clarity to the sound. Almost a little too smooth, right? And I do like the darker, smoother tones, but that was almost a little much and might have a hard time cutting through a mix. The other thing I didn't like was the compression. I'm just not a huge fan of the red squeeze compressor. It's fine if set properly, but to me it was just a little much on this for my liking. So I changed that up. And the other one thing I noticed is the delay was pretty over the top. I found it a lot. A feedback of 35%. Which is going to give all those repeats, which is fine. I mean, again, that's preference. I usually tend to go a little less than that. Okay, and the mix was at 40%, which again, I find a little bit high. So those were my initial reactions to the patch. Okay, so you might say, well, what did you do to change that? Well, let's take a look here. Here's the marooned edit patch that I did. So basically what I did, first thing is I got rid of, like I said, I didn't touch the whammy pedal. I got rid of, and the whammy pedal works quite nicely. By the way, I'm using my middle pickup on this guitar. The sound worked well with bridge, neck, middle, all of them, but I just kind of like it with the middle pickup. I'm not sure what Anton was using. That's one question I didn't ask him. But one thing I did do is I changed the red squeeze out again for the deluxe comp. And I've said this before for anybody who's watched my compression videos. And some of my other videos, I really like the deluxe comp for the simple fact that I can really tweak it. It has a ratio, attack, release, mix. It doesn't just have like a control, it says sensitivity, right? Which we go, well, what does that really mean? That might be a mix of your threshold, maybe a ratio at the same time being adjusted. I don't know. But I like to just know that with the deluxe comp, we have all these parameters and we know what we're dealing with. A little point, originally I had sent this back to Anton with no compression. And that, remember the change I mentioned earlier, that was the change he wanted. He wanted he wanted more sustain, but he kept going after that sustain by adding more gain. Thus the triangle fuzz on 10, right? Whereas I wanted to pull the gain back, but maybe bring some sustain back in with compression, and the deluxe comp would allow that. So for now, I'm going to turn that off. Okay, because this is the original patch that I would have sent Anton without the compression. So keep that in mind, and then we'll compare it after just to show what I could do with that sustain. So we'll come back to the compression settings after. But one of the main things I did, the Scream 808, he had it on with the setting of 0.9 on gain, and I changed that to 3. Upped it a little bit, surprisingly enough, because I was going to get rid of some gain from the triangle fuzz. The tone I moved back to 5, whereas he had it at 6.5, and the level stayed the same. The triangle fuzz I totally got rid of, and I went with a valve driver. Now, my reasoning behind that was, in my experience with the valve driver, it gives a nice singing overdrive sound, nice smooth singing overdrive sound, but can be dialed in, as you can see with the bass and treble, so as not to be too smooth. You can still get some cut out of it. So I like that one, and I brought that in, and instead of having the triangle fuzz on 10, I have the valve driver on 4 with these settings that you see here. The other thing that Anton had was he had the kinky boost on with the boost function turned on. I left that. He had it set at 5.5. I have it set at 5. Some minor change I made as I was tweaking to get things just the way I kind of wanted to hear it. So that's basically what I did for his overdrive section. The chorus, I think I just knocked the mix back to 40%, if I'm not mistaken, on his. He had it at 50%. Again, everything else is the same. Again, I probably could have just left that. That's not going to be a game changer by any stretch, but I did that for whatever reason at the time. I did this a few days ago. So, all right, what else here? Okay, so let's dive into the amp and cab. What you'll notice on Anton's original patch is he had a combination of the Huot 100 with its matching 412 cab. And he had that cab set with a 121 ribbon at a distance of 1. So he's going to get a lot of that warmth out of that mic by not backing it off, right? No low cut, no high cut. Okay, what I wanted to do is use 2 cabs to be able to blend different mics. So what I did is I kept his amp settings exactly as I had them. Well, I did end up tweaking them slightly after the fact, but I just split the amp from the cab so I could come down here onto path 2 and put 2 cabs, both 412 Huot 100s. If you notice, the one with the 121 ribbon, I kept it exactly the same, except I added a low cut at 90 hertz. Okay, and again, very subtle change, but I threw that in there. But I added a second Huat 100 cab, and I added the 87 condenser mic into it. I pulled that back 3 inches with a low cut of 90 hertz and a high cut of 11.1, right in the cab blocks, low and high cuts itself. I found that gave a little more clarity to the sound, got rid of some of the mud because I blended in the condenser mic with it, right? What was the balance between that? I was just even because I just kept it as a split Y. So it's feeding both equally. So it just kind of gave me a little more brightness, but without getting harsh, because I didn't go with a dynamic mic here. I decided to go with a condenser mic. Okay, let's go back to the amp settings. What I did is basically most of them stayed fairly close, although Anton had the bass up at 9. I brought it back to 6.4, get rid of some of that low muddiness. His mids were at 6. I brought them back to 5. His treble was at 2, and I brought that up to 6. Presence was at 7, and I brought that down to 5.2. And then I lowered his master, from 9 to 8.5. Little tweaks just to kind of clean the sound up a little bit. Okay, so then we moved on. The other complaint that I kind of had is I found he was using too much delay. So his original delay settings had the feedback at 35%. I brought that back to 17%. And his mix was at 40%. I brought that back to 26%. So I find one common problem I see in a lot of these is the delay settings are high. And sometimes there's a bunch of reasons for that. I mean, it's a bit of an addiction, right? And I've been there myself. We pump the delay up a little bit. When we're playing, the notes kind of run together nicely. But, if we get too much of it, it tends to take away from our direct signal and buries the sound and makes it less defined, right? So it's going to maybe get lost in a mix a lot easier. Maybe that's what you want. Maybe you want that pulled back sound. That's fine if that's what you're looking for. But I tend to not want to kind of hide behind that delay as much. I want to be able to hear the clarity in the notes I'm playing and not just have it washed out in delay. So thus the mix being brought back. I find my mixes usually get set in and around 20 to 25%. My feedbacks in and around 15 to 20%, depending on what I'm doing. Unless I'm using it for a special effect, that would be different. So, and the other thing that I did is I added my little mastering section that anybody who's watched my previous videos will be aware of or familiar with, where I took my EQ and made a lot of the similar moves that I would make in a lot of my patches. A little boost at 180 hertz, a little cut at 380, 400, just to get some of that muddiness out of there. And these are subtle, right? They're not huge moves. And then a little boost at 4K just to give it a little bit of cut. And then I added my normal LA Studio comp in, very subtle at the end, just to kind of add some glue to it. But if you'll notice, I only have it at 50%, so kind of a parallel compression. So it's still letting some of the unaffected signal through. So that's an important point too. Now that brings us back to the compressor. So that's what I did to compare the two. And I'm gonna actually play this in a little improv over a backing track that I'm gonna shoot a little bit later, just to show how my finished product sounded over the actual maroon backing track, just as a little fun experiment to hear how you can hear how this tone that I tweaked would fit in the actual song. But like I said, Anton, when I first sent him this, he said, I love the tone. He says, it's so much better. He was really happy with it, but he was saying with his guitar, he wasn't getting quite the amount of sustain that he wanted. And he says, what can I do? Can I add some more boost and more distortion? And that's where everybody goes right away, with boost and distortion a lot of times. And they think that's what's going to fix the problem. Well, we're going to get back into maybe that overly saturated tone that may be too almost soft sound. We lose some pick attack, we lose some clarity and some definition. It's not going to cut through the mix as well. So I suggested, I said, well, give me another chance here. I'm going to throw back in a compressor instead of getting rid of it. If I was to dial the sound in just for myself with this guitar in this situation, I had played over the backing track with it. I was happy with this tone. Okay, but again, somebody might want more sustain. And if you have a little bit lower output on your pickups, then, you know, again, maybe that's going to affect it as well. The Godin guitars, a lot of them have this really cool little active switch on it where you can put in something called the high definition revoicer. Let you hear that. That's with it off. When I'm doing these patches for people, I turn it off because it's not really fair to throw an active system into it. It doesn't make the pickups active. It just adds a little active circuitry into the signal flow that gives it a little boost. It's kind of nice, actually. I use it a lot. But anyways, what I did do then is I turned the compressor, the deluxe compressor on. I threw that on, and I went very extreme with it. I went 20:1 ratio, 5 millisecond attack, and a really quite a long release of half a second. So that we'd get maximum sustain. But now the thing is, everybody might go, well, wait, you said those in previous videos that those are really crazy compression settings. But one very important thing is I brought the mix down to 50%. Doing what we call parallel compression. So what this is doing is it's letting a lot of my direct unaffected signal through the compressor and then blending the compressed sound back in with it. So we won't lose all the pick attack. But this did add a lot of sustain to the sound. I personally find it maybe a little bit too compressed for my liking and for my guitar. But again, if that's what we want, then that's going to work for certain people. It's probably going to sound better in the mix. It's really going to help to let it sustain and cut in the mix. So I didn't have to add any gain whatsoever. I had to add some makeup gain in the compressor, but no distortion or overdrive. So when I sent that back to Anton, as such, he was very happy with that. He was thrilled with it, and that was great. That made me pretty happy that I could help him out with it. So, and again, you know, if somebody doesn't want that on it, simply just turn the compressor off, and you go back to the sound like I probably would have played with it in the beginning. I still find there's lots of sustain there, but again, this is my guitar, my pickups, my playing style, right? Even somebody's pick attack, the way that their vibrato is going to affect the sustain, all of those things are. The setup on their guitar, if the action's super low, maybe you're going to lose some sustain. There's so many variables to this that we can't possibly, I couldn't possibly dial this in perfect for everybody's playing style and particular guitar pickups they're using, right? So, I mean, I do my best and then get the feedback from somebody. But so, like I'm saying, I would have probably went with this particular sound for this guitar. But like I said, others, you know, depending on their pickup configuration, guitar and whatnot, are gonna might find some differences. So easy enough. Flick on the compressor if needed, and if not, then we can turn it off, right? So we have it on here. So those are the settings I would use. And again, you could even pull this parallel compression back even more to get more of the original signal and just blend in the compression a little bit. So that would be the setting I would play with a lot there. Went very extreme on the compressor and then blended into taste, right? I think I gave it 50% for Anton, but again, if Anton's watching, you can play with that if you find it too much as well. So let me give you some example of this played with the backing track. I hope you guys enjoy that, and I hope I covered everything. I try to make some decent notes before I do these videos on what I changed, and I hope I don't miss anything. But I think that gives in a nutshell what I did, and I'm so happy that Anton was happy with that. I've had really great response to this idea of this video series, which again wasn't my idea. I thank Dan again, who was the viewer who submitted the first patch. So he had this idea, and it turns out it's great. So that's awesome. I really appreciate that. And I have some more of these to do. I've been sent quite a number of tones, but again, get in contact with me, and if I can accept your tone and have the time to do it, I'm more than happy to do so. And hopefully we can make this a weekly thing if I have time. So if you don't mind, please subscribe to the channel, like the videos, share them. That's how I can make this thing grow and actually make it possible to keep doing them. And I really appreciate everybody's support. Thank you guys so much. And we will see you next time.